Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going over an issue we're having with kitchen sink. We've got a Moen single handle kitchen faucet with a pull down, and what seems to be happening is we've got cold water with decent pressure, and when you rotate the handle over to the hot side you have barely a trickle of water. So let me just show you what's going on here. Here's our sink, and when you have the handle on the cold side, the flow is completely fine, and as we rotate the handle over to call for hot water, we go down to a trickle. So stay tuned. We're going to show you how to take this all apart, diagnose what's going on, and reassemble, and show you how to fix it yourself. Stay tuned. Alright guys, step one, make some room under your cabinet. Most of us are going to have cleaning supplies and whatnot under here, and it helps to have this space empty so you can not only see what you're doing, but you are going to be crawling into the cabinet to be able to see behind the sink. It's pretty tight back there, so you know, it just helps to have this space clean. Also, there's going to be a little bit of water that comes out of the lines, your hot and cold lines and your pull down line. So it helps it makes it easier to see that as it spills out, and also easier to clean up. So step one, get this cleaned up. So next step, now that you have this done, you're going to go and turn off your water supply. Now in this case, we have hot and cold lines, PEX lines coming through the bottom of the cabinet with shutoff valves. So we are going to turn those off. If you don't have valves like this underneath your sink, you may have them in the basement, in the floor joist where the water lines come up, or you may have to go and turn off your main water supply at the meter. So we're just going to go ahead and we're gonna turn this water off. After you turn the water off, open your valve just to let some air into the line. So we talked about making some room, making it as easy as you can to get in here and get this job done. So what I like to do is, you know, these type of cabinets with European hinges, they're real simple to take apart. On the back of these hinges, there's a little tab. So you just pull the tab forward to release the hinge. Just bear with me here. I'm going to grab the bottom one, and then I'm basically taking my door out of the way, and this creates a whole bunch of space. So we're going to remove both doors, and also in your typical sink cabinet you have a false drawer front that hides the front of the bowl of the sink. Unless you got a farmhouse sink, you wouldn't have this, but these false fronts also pop out. There's plastic clips that hold them on. You just simply pull them out. There's your clips. See? So I'm going to remove both of these, and that's going to buy me quite a bit of room under here, and I'm not going to ruin any of the finish on the cabinetry. So next step done. Now we'll go over some of the components under here. Okay guys, we've got our hot and cold supply lines. We got the valves turned off. This is where you're going to use your 5/8 wrench to take these lines off. We've got our main faucet line, which is actually the pull down line as well. This is the weight that actually is used to hold this line down and help to pull your faucet extension back up into the body of the faucet. We have that, and a quick disconnect that you're going to see to disconnect that line from the line that feeds up into the faucet. Crawling underneath here, you're going to see, yeah, your hot and cold lines run up into the faucet. They are labeled. There's a clamp that holds the faucet to the underside of the countertop, and there's a nut that is used to tighten that down, keep it secure. And also there's a plastic grommet you can see right here that as this pull down line moves through this stud back and forth, this plastic grommet just keeps it from rubbing on the brass and chafing and rubbing through that braided line. So that's basically what we're dealing with as we look underneath. Hopefully you guys can see all this, and now we're going to get to the removal part. So start by taking your 5/8 wrench, Apologies guys, I'm going to be trying to do this with one hand here. It's really not too bad. It's important that you can identify your hot and cold water lines just to make sure you hook your tap up the right way. Typically, if you have a dishwasher like we do here, you're going to see the hot line feeds the dishwasher, so we know this is our hot, and our hot line going to our tap is also labeled. So there's not going to be a lot of pressure here. We've got the tap open up top. We're just going to take our 5/8 wrench and we're going to loosen this nut off, and it gets to the point where you can just take it off with your fingers and place it over our rag that we've got here just to catch any water coming out of there. We're going to go over and do the same with the cold line. Now, these aren't super tight. They're definitely snug to the point where things compress and nothing leaks. Again, if you've got a big enough rag, you can just spread it out underneath here. It's going to help you catch it all. So take your cold line off now. We got a little bit dripping here, no big deal. Tiny bit of pressure there. Okay, so now we got our hot and cold supply lines, faucet lines taken off. Mop up any water that comes out, of course. Next, we're going to deal with this black weight because we have to take this pull down line apart. So this black weight has a little bit of a clip on it, and you just simply pry back on the clip and you separate the weight and you pull that off, set that aside. You won't need that. Next, what we're going to deal with here is this quick connect coupler. So as you can see, this bottom line, there's a couple O-rings on here. It snaps into this white plastic piece. There is a black button here, and you simply push the button in with your thumb and this faucet line pulls out. And now we've got all of our lines disconnected. We'll kind of let the water drain out of those, and there's definitely going to be a little bit. We're not talking about, you know, we're not talking about a gallon here, but there's going to be a little bit of water, so catch it as best you can. Give it a minute. All right, we are going to move on to disconnecting the faucet from underneath the countertop. So the reason why we took the quick disconnect apart is because you need to have access to slide. Let's see if I can show you this here. You need to slide your faucet wrench over this line, because it's going to slide all the way up along this line to reach the nut on the underside of that countertop. Okay, before we take the nut and the clamp off that's holding down our faucet to our counter, we're going to remove this plastic little grommet here. Just unthread it, slide it down your main line, get that out of the way. Okay, I'll see if I can film this here properly for you guys. Sorry about the tight space here. We've got our faucet wrench. Notice the hex end is facing up. We're going to slide our wrench up over the stud and it slides onto the nut. We turn it counterclockwise and you can see that nut loosens up fairly easy. It's not going to be that tight. So at this point we don't need the wrench anymore. The nut is basically finger tight, so I'm just going to reach up, unscrew this nut all the way down the stud, just like so. That's, you're going to let that slide down your pull down line, and this clamp is also going to come down. As soon as you start moving the faucet a bit, notice this clamp comes down with it. So once you've taken these two items off, remove them from your pull down line, set these pieces aside. So that's kind of what you're left with once you've disassembled everything. Now we move back up top. Basically, we're ready to take the faucet and pull it out of the top of the sink. Now the fitting where your pull down hose, that quick connect hooks into, it's a little bigger, so just make sure you don't force it, but it does fit. It's a tight fit. You can see it come through. and we've got our faucet removed. So now we're going to take it down into the basement. We're going to troubleshoot this a bit, and what I believe is you got your, we've had this happen before, you've got your hot and cold lines and they come up the faucet into the mixing valve here. Any little bit of debris or sediment that ends up in these lines with the water pressure, if it gets pushed up and basically blocks one of the pinholes in this valve, that it doesn't take much to reduce the water flow to almost nothing. So we're going to do a little bit of troubleshooting. We are going to put a little bit of compressed air through the lines and try and dislodge what is causing the flow to slow down. And once we're able to remove what's in there, we should be able to put things back together and be back to normal operations. So each of these hot and cold lines threads into the body of the faucet, a couple O-rings, and you can see the threaded section there. So I've unthreaded the cold line where I thought I had a restriction, and I'm able to blow compressed air right through it. So I'm going to put that line back in, and I'm going to unthread the hot side and just make sure there's nothing in that line. I'm going to try this again, blowing air through the cold side. Yeah, it's definitely still a restriction there. So I'm going to blow air through the hole where I removed the hot side. Okay. So as we mentioned before, what we did was we unthreaded each of these hot and cold lines from the body of this faucet. We blew them out just to make sure there was no restriction there. We knew there was no restriction through the main hose coming out the faucet head. We cleaned that out, and we also blew compressed air. And if you don't have compressed air, you can take a pick or something small to sort of scrape out where the hose seats in the valve itself, because all it takes is the tiniest speck of dirt to plug one of these lines and your flow is cut to next to nothing. So just to show you here, I've got the faucet open on the cold side. I'm going to blow through the cold line, and we're going to have water coming out of the main head. Just like that. So we know that's clear. And now I'm going to open the valve to the hot side. Do the same thing with the hot labeled hose. And we get flow. So already before I hook this back up, just by taking the two supply lines off the faucet body, cleaning out the valve from the underside, we've removed the debris. And a lot of times the debris is in the water system, or it comes from a newer home build where just construction dirt is in the water lines as they're hooked up, and it only takes a small piece of dirt to limit the flow. So removal, or the installation, is going to be reverse of removal. So we'll go through that next. We'll get this put back together and we'll give it a test run with some water pressure. So install is reverse of removal. There is a tiny plastic ring that sits between the bottom of the faucet and the top of your sink. While you're in here, I've gone ahead and I've cleaned off some of the hard dirt that's trapped under there. So first step is just to make sure that this little plastic gasket is in place. After that, we still got our rags in place down below just to catch any of the moisture that we have in here from testing these lines. So we're going to feed our hot, cold, and our main water line back through the hole in the sink. Of course, your gasket's going to fall out on you. We'll make sure that's in there. Sit our faucet in like so. When you're doing this and you want to make sure your faucet's nice and centered, it always helps to have a second set of hands. So you start by So yeah, the clamp has to slide over the main stud, so you have to slide this clamp and this nut all the way up the main supply line here. So we're gonna see if I can show you this here. Get your back underneath, get our clamp slid up, and make sure you have your hot, cold, and your line all in the ears of the clamp, just like that. Once you have your clamp up there, you slide your nut back up the main line, so you can spin that up there till it's finger tight, and then we're going to go back in with our faucet wrench that we use to loosen it, and we're actually going to tighten it. And again, like I mentioned, second set of hands while holding this in place really comes in handy. So we'll get this as snug as we can. Okay, we got our faucet wrench back on the nut. Faucet's in the place where we want it, and I'm going to tighten this as much as I can. And you want this fairly snug so your faucet doesn't move around on you. So we got that fairly tight. Okay, last step underneath here before we make our connections is just to thread this little gasket on, this plastic collar. It doesn't go on very far, just allows this hose to move up and down without getting all chafed up and wrecked. All right, last parts of the install. Gonna take our main feed line, gonna go back into our plastic connector that snaps into place just like so. And you want to put this weight back on near the bottom of the loop of the hose, just above the bottom loop, and snap that on. The last thing we're going to do is make our hot and cold connections. Get them finger tight. Get both sides on as tight as you can, and then grab your 5/8 wrench again and snug these fittings up. Now you don't have to crank them tight, but you want them to be fairly snug. Okay, we're going to slowly open the valves. You don't have to crank them wide open. A little bit of pressure rushing through the lines as we do this, so we're going to take it nice and easy. Come back up to the top of our sink here. So we start by running the cold side, let the air out. We've got our cold water flow, and where we had the problem moving over to hot on this faucet, we're all the way over to hot, as you can see. And we have full flow, and that water is nice and warm. So by cleaning out those lines, blowing out the valve, we've solved our issue. The issue was not in the handle portion or in the cartridge. It was in that mixing portion of the faucet body here. So good to go. Okay, so final steps before we wrap this one up. We're popping our false drawer fronts back in here, and they simply just click back into the brackets just like so. And we're going to get our doors back in place. Now these doors have a little bit of a hook right here that hooks into this portion of the hardware of the hinge right here. So that's what you start with. Let's see if I can show this to you guys with one hand. Get your hinge in that, and then you snap down. You just snap down on this front section, and that snaps back into place. Do the same with on the bottom side, and your door's back on. Make sure it closes and shuts the way it should, and that's it. All right, so guys, we got everything buttoned up, doors back on, false fronts back on. It's not the toughest job in the world. We want you to be able to recognize some of these issues. It helps know how to take it apart and reassemble it like we've done here. So I hope this helps some of you troubleshoot tap problems on your own. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.